Hello everybody, I'm Rhinocio, and it's a beautiful day during Quarantine 2.0 in Halifax. Because for my partner and I, these city shutdowns are generally time in which we do crafts and writing and other such artsy things, I thought it might be nice to catch up on some drawings I've been meaning to do forever. This is our very bougie setup. I'll be mostly working with my not-so-great watercolor crayons and a selection of my standard kit: pencils, archival ink, and some gel pens and Poscas for corrections. Because I have so many more thinky thoughts than can fit in my brain hole, I've taken to writing down sketch ideas in this little notebook for later reference. I'm so often caught up in pumping out content for one specific fandom that I haven't gotten around to doing most of them, so that's what we're going to tackle today. This sketchbook is fairly new. While I have started working in an identical sketchbook to the one I just did a tour about, this big sparkly monster was a gift from my wife, and I think because it was from the dollar store and therefore feels appropriate to mess with, has completely stolen my attention. I've been playing around with new mediums and techniques and generally just shitposting all over this thing. Defo would recommend getting you a garbage sketchbook. This page here is one of my favorites, because in my going ham, it's become beautifully chaotic. I'd love to emulate something like this today, except without being so fandom specific. I could start a brand new page, but I've already got this one going with a couple of goofy sketches, so we're just gonna expand on what we have here. First, we gotta pin down the edges, because I'm planning to throw water all over this thing. Oops. Okay, bye. The sketches in here were technically also done by prompt, because I came up with them while scrolling through my Tumblr reboogles for ideas. I've already got a couple of prompts picked out for the book, so let's get to it! I've had an idea for a jellyfish mermaid for a while, but what that would actually look like wasn't ever very clear in my brain, and this rendition isn't exactly selling me. I thought it would be neat if the jelly's bell was like a big hat that was also part of the lower body, and I like the idea of the mer creature being more of a deep sea fella, so I gave them big old eyes. Sketching this out was about as close as I tend to come to thumbnailing things, and normally I wouldn't keep a drawing I wasn't super happy with, but learning to put stuff I'm iffy about in my sketchbook is something I'm working on, so the fish stays! We're doing a lot of jump cutting and camera angle changes through this video, just so y'all know. Next I wanted to draw an elven character. I had written down that I wanted it to be one of the twins from the Taz Balance podcast, but then I remembered that really neat lop bunny ear shape I've seen out in the wilds, and I decided to slap that on there, so, this could be Loop, but it could also just be a random elf. We've got a big bar of beef boy next, because y'all know how I feel about those. This one is sort of a spiritual successor to my cherry blossom boy, with his little flower crown and the blooms I shoved in other parts of his design later on, but I didn't have too clear of an image for what I was going for besides big, bearded, and wearing overalls. It feels a little like cheating that this image took up so much of the page, but in my trying to make the boy round and soft, he just kinda demanded the space. In any case, it's not a big deal, because I've been trying to train myself to draw things bigger. I've gotten so used to sketching everything at the same scale that any variation feels hard. So let's call this a happy accident. Here's where the sun rats me out. You see, for all that other artists can apparently just decide to do an entire illustration in one sitting, I am far too easily bored for that. After I'd slapped out the first chunk of drawings, I'd gone off to have a snack and do a workout and whatever else, and then by the time I came back, the sun was coming through the window in full force. What should have taken me a day of focused work actually spanned about 3, because I kept putting this project down to do other stuff, like read my wife's fanfic, which I've depicted here in a rare self-portrait. I also drew the two of us combining our powers to collaborate on fandom nonsense, because that's all we've been doing lately. Once I had everything sketched out and ready to be colorized, it was time to whip out the watercolors. I've mentioned before that I'm using Garbo crayons like paints and that they have a chalky texture I don't care for, but I will say, in trying to burn them up, I'm getting much more comfortable with the medium as a whole. Skin tones continue to be hard as heck to mix, but I'm figuring it out. Despite having a peachy tone in the box, I tend to start with a blend of red and blue, and then pop some yellow and or orange in there until I have the right shade, and then I lighten it if necessary. I've also started testing skin tones on my hand in order to keep them in like a reasonable range. Obviously this means I'm going to be leaning towards shades that are on the warmer side since I have an orange undertone, but it's made my colors more accurate than just eyeballing it. I got bored of the watercolors pretty early, so I switched over to some of my archival ink pens to outline my soft boy. I did like him better before I inked his face on Forge. I was using a much larger pen size than I normally do, so I lost some of the finer details of his expression. Nah, well. That evening, after I'd showered and stolen my wife's comfy leggings, I brought out my water-based pens, which are great for slapping grayscale shading onto sketches. I mostly use the cold grays because the warm tones tend to make my work look a little sour. I'm not such a fan of the warmer grays. I put some inking on that elf lady as well, because I was really liking her look and I didn't want any of the details to be lost to the smudge power of my wandering hand. Some of the sketches on the far right side of the spread had already gotten muddied. At the end of day one, this was all I had finished, and oh boy, it was hard not to compare my progress to other artists. I may not be a speedy boy, but my goal was to fill the pages, not necessarily to be quick about it, so there's no sense bullying myself. The next day I went in with renewed vigor and started tackling the jellyfish cryptid, who I'd been avoiding for lack of a plan. The markers were a good choice, I think, because they implied all the deep sea darkness I wanted without forcing me to deal with a stark black background. Whilst I was stealing shitty colored pencils for my pea sprouts in the garden to climb, I serendipitously pulled out a handful of these pastel shades, and I decided they were what I was going to use for this kissing sketch in the corner. The yellow shade, one of my rare Prismacolors, was so smudge powerful that it pulled the graphite from the pencil around and made things a little bit muddy. Oops. I went back to the watercolors for most of the other stuff, though I kept the elf in all shades of purple, just for something different. Using the same medium doesn't mean everything has to be working off the same palette or level of saturation. The prompt for this character was a dark-skinned elf with gold freckles, and I definitely dropped the ball on the former part of that, but I committed to the latter by whipping out the gold paint. In retrospect, my gold ballpoint pen would have been better, since I can control it more easily, but sketchbooks are for oopsies, so it's fine. I likewise took to this tiny doodle of Taco and Kravitz from Taz Balance with a blue-ish range of colors. I just kept alternating amounts of red and blue in a single dish and then slapping those colors on. This is probably my least favorite drawing in the spread, but I also didn't put much effort into it. You get out what you put in, right? Among my watercolor crayons is this sepia? This red-brown color that I rarely touch, but luckily this cow I drew is the perfect candidate for a direct application of it. If anybody knows why such a strange color is included in the basic pack, I would love some insight. Once I'd watercolored the heck out of basically everything on the spread, it was back to the inking pens to finish them all. I for sure don't have the skill to paint something and not define it later with lines, but I'd love to develop that someday. I'd say that after 3 days and probably 8 or so hours of work on this, I'm pretty happy with the result. I definitely think I'd like to try this again in the future, especially if it means whittling down my prompt list again. Please let me know if you guys liked it and if there's anything else you'd enjoy seeing more of or done differently. As per always, you have my deepest thanks for tuning in, and if you'd like to hang out and see more of this kind of stuff in the future, feel free to escribe, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye!